Welcome to What is Going for new thought from the edge of Each week on Times flagship radio show, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer conducts thought-provoking interviews with inspirational authors, artists, musicians, scientists, speakers, and filmmakers who are working at the point where spirituality and science meet consciousness at the very edge of Here is your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. Sacred sites, prehistoric stone circles, rock concerts, sports events, phantom limb pain, paranormal phenomena, and charisma, that elusive qualities some people have to sway opinions and influence mass consciousness. What do they all have in common? The answer is energy. Eric Leskowitz MD is a retired Harvard Medical School affiliated psychiatrist who practiced pain management for more than 25 years at Spaulding Rehabilitation Hospital in Boston. The author-editor of 4 books and more than 50 articles published in peer-reviewed scientific journals, his documentary, The Joy of Socks, about group energies and sports, aired nationally on PBS in 2012. And in his latest book, The Mystery of Life Energy, Biofield Healing, Phantom Limbs, Group Energetics, and Gaia Consciousness, he shares why phantom limb pain provides direct proof for the existence of a biofield. He also shares how energy therapies can cure chronic pain, PSTD, and more, and how the alignment of your personal energy biofield can bring about a state of true spiritual awakening that can help transcend our current states of crises in medicine, politics, and religion. Dr. Eric Leskowitz, welcome.
Thank you, Sandie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, you were brought up by a secular family that worshipped at the altar of scientific materialism. You've said that maths and sciences had all the answers, and life's essence was to be found in material structures, and every human experience could be reduced to matter. Then you changed your mind. What led to that change?
Well, it was a gradual process. I didn't have a, road to Damascus type of enlightenment experience, but it was just a combination of things. Part of it was the times. I went away to college in the late 60s, early 70s. And that was first step breaking away from the traditional way of thinking about things. A lot of political unrest, not trusting authority. That was an important theme then and now. And also experiencing altered states of consciousness through some herbal assistance. And that was, important to know that your mind could do more than we thought. I studied physiological psychology, and I thought neurotransmitters were the answer. I was going to go to medical school, but fortunately, I took some time off and did some traveling, and went to different cultures overland to India, and saw that different people treated illness differently. And sometimes the remedy was a pellet that looked like rabbit droppings, or some herbal prep, or poking needles in the skin, and things that didn't fit my model at all. So I went back to medical school wondering what was going on, and I found out that medical school didn't have the answers. One of the first vocabulary words I learned to describe certain illnesses was idiopathic. So it was idiopathic hypertension, which basically is a fancy Greek way of saying, Latin way of saying, we don't know what's going on. And so that was kind of a wake-up call. And I, began to look at other things. I had learned how to meditate. And at that time, there were a total of maybe 3 published papers on clinical effects of meditation. But that was like, for me, the entry point. I did go into psychiatry because I always knew that the mind was important and stress was acknowledged as a contributor to health and illness. But it really wasn't until I had been a couple of years into my career as a psychiatrist at the Veterans Administration, the VA clinic, working on post-traumatic stress. A friend invited me to go to a lecture on energy healing, which normally I would have just dismissed and say, well, come on, you can't be serious. But Richard was a guy I trusted, so I went, and it totally changed things. I went to a lecture by Reverend Rosalind Briere, based in Los Angeles. She's a psychic, clairvoyant who worked with the medical community. They trusted her because she could see what was going on behind the scenes, and she could change things through the energy of her hands. So I ended up doing 7 or 8 years of regular intensives with her, and it was really an eye-opener, because I could see that there was a whole dimension, literally a whole dimension that Western medicine ignored, and that's the subtle energies, or prana, or chi. All the other healing traditions of the world have terms for it because it's the cornerstone, the key of their ways of understanding things. And it didn't show up with us because, as you were saying in the intro, we're so focused on the material, whether it's the muscles, the bones, the chemicals, the atoms, you keep breaking it down, and the hope is that by putting it all together, you'll get health. But it doesn't work that way because we're missing the integrative part that gives us this balance. So that really, once I started seeing what energy therapies could do, that was a big changer. And I learned a series of techniques from. First one I learned was therapeutic touch, which is your viewers can just simply go like this, bring your hands together and apart, and at some point, at a certain distance, you'll feel something. And it's some people it's a pressure, some people it's tingling, but it's not the temperature. It's not the 98.6 degrees or 37 degrees, you would say, of the temperature. It's something else. And what I've come to believe, and what the therapeutic touch people believe, is that you are feeling your own biofield, that there's a balloon of energy around us. And when you do this, you're bouncing the two edges and you can feel it. And so it can be used to smooth out a patient. You can assess where their imbalance is. So I began to use that in my clinical work. There are other aspects of the biofield, the acupuncture points that many people are familiar with now. There's a whole form of psychotherapy that involves the patient tapping on their own acupuncture points while they think about upsetting things. And really wonderful, rapid, dramatic things happen with these energy-based therapies that don't happen with talk therapy or cognitive behavior therapy or what have you. So I really think it's breaking things wide open now. And fortunately, the professional organizations of these for these techniques have done a really good job of going into the research and finding very solid documentation, A, of the effects that the therapies have, the clinical impact, and B, what's going on. How does it actually affect your brain or your blood chemistry or your hormones? So it's pretty hard to dismiss this stuff now the way it could have been 10, 20, 30 years.
How did you say that it changed the way you ran your practice and the things that you did with your clients. How was that accepted by your peers?
Well, I looking back on it, I was in sort of the ideal setting. I didn't know it at the time, but I was working with chronic pain, and we got all the rejects. I mean, basically, these were patients who the mainstream doctors couldn't do anything about. So they said, here, you take them, you do something. So whatever works, we don't care, just do it. And so the clinicians had that approach, and the patients were willing to try anything too. Plus, the center that I started out at was had a unique kind of culture of already being open to things. At the time, biofeedback was considered innovative, but to treat chronic pain, not by throwing more medicines at the person, but teaching them techniques to regulate their nervous system. So we attracted physical therapists, occupational therapists, nurses, doctors who already had this kind of interest. And at first, behind the scenes, we had some clandestine meetings where we each confessed that we had done a workshop in energy healing, and we sort of literally came out of the closet that this was what we did. And it had a big impact on patients. And, gradually it got to be accepted. We got a few grants that helped to kind of solidify things. And, looking back, I have to admit that the hospital's culture was open enough to accept it. There were some pretty big bumps in the road, and I talk about that a bit in my book because in retrospect, they're kind of humorous, but at the time it was really a hassle. But things have changed a lot since I started this work.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, for millennia, we have had wise women, medicine men, hedge witches, healers who have been so connected to nature and have vast knowledge of plants, herbs, and subtle energy, and absolutely invaluable to their communities. And then along comes modern medicine.
Yeah.
And suddenly all of that is gone, and we've lost touch with what we knew about energy.
Yeah. You mentioned herbs, and it was an eye opener just to see how many of the prescription medicines that are now touted derived from herbs, or even, penicillin was a mold. Aspirin was the bark of a willow tree. So
Yes.
we just don't acknowledge our roots, and there's some pride, some false pride in that, and intellectual narcissism, you could say. But I think things are in a crisis now, and that encourages people to look back and reassess things. Pharmaceuticals have been in a lot of hot water. The pharmaceutical companies, the industry itself, have been in a lot of hot water lately. So the aura is
Well,
tainted.
in many respects, I mean, we look at Wikipedia, and any mention of anything that is slightly alternative, we'll hear those words, those same words that come out, pseudoscience all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
But as you said, it's encouraged many of these organizations to actually do further research in order to be able to ground the knowledge and prove that these things work.
Yeah, I mean, I used to have a lot of faith in Wikipedia and would go to it all the time. But the organization for the tapping, what's called energy psychology, was concerned that it was always referred to as a pseudoscience. So we had a petition that thousands of people signed to Wikipedia saying, please reassess your data. We actually got a response from the head of Wikipedia, from Jimmy Wales himself. And he said that he stuck to the highest science, and he wasn't going to respond to the requests of lunatic charlatans. This is a professional organization of over 1,000 doctors and clinical psychologists. He called us lunatic charlatans. So, something was missing in that.
What does he mean by higher science, and how dare he be
Yeah.
the arbiter?
Yeah, no, that's literally what it was. That he was the arbiter. We, with all our training, you obviously missed the boat. So that if I want, this is what I say. If I want to know Britney Spears' birthday, I'll look on Wikipedia. But if I want to learn about holistic therapies, there's other places to go.
It was interesting in the book. You had this little section that I think you labelled Nixon's. Was it Nixon saving Western medicine? Apparently, on some trip to the Far East, one of the journalists in his retinue became very ill and was actually healed with acupuncture, and that was a complete revelation.
Yeah, it was. It's ironic on several counts, because back when I was in college, Nixon was the bad guy and the enemy, and yet here he is doing something that really opens some important doors. Right, a very prominent journalist for the New York Times had acupuncture to help with his surgery. He had appendicitis, so he had acupuncture anesthesia, which shouldn't have been possible by Western medicine. And he wrote about it. And that one article really forced people to take a look, because up until then, the idea was, and one of my medical students said this, a medical school professor said, the reason acupuncture works in China is because everybody has been brainwashed by Chairman Mao to believe whatever he says. So how could James Reston have responded if he's not, Chinese? So it was an important eye opener for a lot of people, and acupuncture paved the way.
I've said it many times on this show that the placebo effect is known to be far more efficient than any double-blind trials, and that's what they should have been studying a long time ago.
Well, it's interesting that now they are studying the placebo effect, because people have finally acknowledged what you're saying, that it's a big, big factor. And sometimes you try and weigh how much of an impact does the medicine itself have, or the therapy itself, and how much is just the expectation, the hope, the power of suggestion. Those are powerful, powerful resources. And there are times when I find myself shifting more to the Christian Science end of it, where it's all generated internally, and the external substances are just active placebos, that they may do something. They may make your mouth dry or something, but it's your belief system. Your belief in the medication is what can be the most powerful factor. So there's research in it now, and Actually, as you mentioned, I'm affiliated with Harvard Medical School, and when they had a meeting probably like 20 years ago to decide what to call their new branch, because they had gotten a big grant to fund some of this, to what to call it. It ended up being integrative medicine, but one of the, we were brainstorming, one of the nominees was to call it the Department of Placebo Medicine, because they literally could not believe that it did anything. It was just woo-woo magic. So, things have changed a lot. Things have changed a lot.
Mm. So at what point did you get interested in the work the studies that you did with players on the field, sports people?
Well, being British, you might not know this, but in the year 2004, the baseball team from Boston, Massachusetts, won the World Series of America and won the championship after a long 86-year drought. And it was very exciting. I was a sports fan. I'm not a good athlete, but I was a sports fan. And you could just see something in the air, the way everybody got caught up in it. And so I sort of played around with that as a way to talk about energy. What were the group energies on the team, what they call team chemistry? How did the fan energy affect? So I wrote an op-ed in the paper, and I thought that was it. But my cousin, a filmmaker, he actually contacted the team and got their permission for us to come and film a documentary. And it was a blast to do, but it was very eye-opening, because we talked to the players and how they experience the support of fan energy and how they can go with that flow. We talk to fans, and many of them have superstitions, but there's also the sense that they can participate. We also did some measurements. We did some one on team chemistry, I guess you could say, about how people who are in a state of what they call heart coherence can create a resonant field that others respond to. I was a guinea pig in the lab, where my heart rhythm was being monitored. I was blindfolded and had earplugs, so I couldn't hear anything through the senses. But when some of the heart math meditators came in and started doing their heart coherence meditation, which was silent, they were just thinking about the feeling of appreciation. My heart rhythm locked in within like 10 seconds. It was very dramatic, and I actually wasn't expecting it to work. So it was not a placebo effect, in fact.
What did you notice in those moments?
My subjective feeling was a sense of lightness and openness. I was familiar with that from some of the energy work that I'd done. So it was like somebody was doing energy work on me, but there were people behind me they were probably like 2, 3, 4 feet away from me. And I think the sense was that I was in their we were in a shared energy field, electromagnetic or etheric. It's not exactly clear what the nature of that energy in the interaction was, but it was there. It was measurable. It's reproducible, and I think it was a big part of why the team did so well that year, because the players liked each other. They appreciated each other. There was a brotherhood. You hear about it, like now with the Olympics going on. Many of the teams are also saying very similar things, that's the key to how they support each other, and that's energetic at its base.
Well, of course, we've long seen this at rock concerts, at religious gatherings, where, people, it's almost as though they become something other. They become connected to something much bigger than themselves.
That's it in a nutshell. And I think that's the attraction of these large-scale events, is that you can transcend your personal ego, your personal self, and connect to something bigger, whether it's your tribe, your nation, your global humanity, or even transcending that. It is really important, and I think it's one of the key human drives. And it's ironic, but sports can be a vehicle for that. Participation in sports can help you to link your body, mind, and spirit in a way that you don't usually think of sport as a spiritual practice, but it can accomplish some of the same things. An important person in my development, and for thousands of people, is a fellow named Michael Murphy, who is best known as the co-founder of the Esalen Institute, the sort of Center for Human Potential movement in California 30, 40 years ago. He was an amateur athlete, and he also was a student of Sri Aurobindo in India. And he noticed how some of the higher functioning supernatural paranormal abilities that come with yogic practice have also been described by athletes. And he wrote a book called In the Zone. Actually, I have if I may show an image, this is the book that he wrote, In the Zone, and the subtitle is great. It's
We're seeing
Transcendent.
it back to front because we're
Oh,
from the title back to front.
okay. Well,
Yeah.
it's called In the Zone, but Transcendent Experience in Sports, because his sort of summary was that sport is the yoga of the West. That's a really profound distillation.
Mm.
And I really don't need to say any more. That says it all. So that was part of what was fun to uncover, using my local sports team as an example. But Manchester United or whatever, there's great crowd energies when they sing their favorite songs. I did make a documentary about it, which is now up on YouTube. So if anybody wants to check it out, just go to YouTube and print in The Joy of Sox. It's SOX. That's the name of the team, the Red Sox, SOX. And there's a double entendre for those who.
You said you likened it to a bit of a spiritual experience, and I'm sure for many people it is. I wonder whether we would use the same words when people are gathered for different kinds of intention, like Hitler, for example. I mean, he could mesmerize people. Many, politicians, intelligent or not, can mesmerize people. That's not quite well, I wouldn't call it a spiritual experience, but some of the people there might.
Well, the really good point, and the way I have come to think about it, many people talk about it the same way, is there different types of emotions, there's different frequencies, there's different energies, from the more exalted, unity consciousness type of things, to you can be united with a group in anger, in rage, in resentment. And that's a very powerful force. It does take you out of yourself. So you go beyond your ego, but you're meeting at a place that's destructive and polarizing. And, we see a lot of that these days in the political arena. And hopefully this will be it's a challenge, but I have a hunch that we're sort of at a tipping point, and there will be enough people who can move into the higher consciousness state of mind rather than get caught up in the automatic us versus them type of fighting.
One would hope so. So at what point did you start looking at things like phantom limb pain?
Well, it was not a very common diagnosis among the patients that we treated. It was more commonly musculoskeletal things or fibromyalgia, but we did have a few. And there was one particular clinical encounter that really, those 20 minutes changed my life in the sense. There was a fellow who, a young guy, he was about 35, who had an amputation of his leg from a worksite injury, and had phantom pain, which is the sense that the limb is still there. Not only is it there, but it's very, very painful, and it doesn't respond to the usual medicines and injections and whatnot. He wasn't doing very well in our program. So I said to him, "I want to try something different." And as I mentioned, they are willing. So he lay down on the examining table. And I said, "Just close your eyes and relax, and I'm just going to help you balance things out." And I did this therapeutic touch smoothing out that I had mentioned before. And, in the upper part of his body, I felt this pressure tingling thing. And then I'm still not really sure why I did it. I continued down over his phantom leg and did the same smoothing out thing. And I felt the exact same pressure over his phantom leg that I felt in the rest of his body, as though the leg was still there. So I was kind of gobsmacked. But even more importantly, he opened his eyes and said, "What are you doing, doc?" Because he could feel me touching his phantom limb, which shouldn't have been possible because there are no nerves there. There's no nerves within like a foot and a half or 2 feet of where my hands were. So that single moment really proved to me that the biofield is a tangible, objective thing. It's something out there. It's not just some mental imagination type of thing. And if you smooth it out, the pain, he felt it draining out felt like a valve at the bottom of his foot. He didn't know it. I didn't know it at the time, but that was a key acupuncture point that's often used to treat it. So, the energy anatomy is there to be used if people know how to do it. So from that moment on, I flipped everything inside out and made the biofield the focus, and a lot developed from that.
Did you have any evidence that somebody who was experiencing phantom limb pain, if you gave them an aspirin or a drug or a painkiller, would that have an effect on the pain?
For many people, it helps. The medicines do help many people, but as I said, we attracted the people that didn't respond to those treatments. And phantom limb pain happens to be one of the more intractable types of pain. So I had a series that I treated with not so much therapeutic touch. I ended up gravitating towards tapping because you could teach the patients to do it for themselves, and using that modality. It turns out that a lot of the phantom limb pain has its origin in the emotional trauma of the amputation. Obviously, amputations are traumatic, and surgeons don't focus on that. But if you can deal with the repressed emotions about the amputation, whether it's from an automobile accident or whether it's from just looking at yourself in the mirror and being ashamed that you're missing, there's strong emotions involved. And if you can find a way to soften and release those emotions, the energetic blocks get released and the pain is alleviated. And it's there, it's real.
And many people, of course, say, that this is evidence that the human body is a hologram.
Well, this is a really cool part, because at first I thought the biofield is something that's kind of emitted by the body, like the glow from a light bulb. It's a side effect. But there was some research done with what's called the phantom leaf effect. Mm. Back in the day when Kirlian photographs were kind of a cool thing, there were images of a leaf that shows the corona around it. I also have you don't need to read the words, but this is the picture of a Kirlian photograph of a leaf.
I know that.
What would happen if you cut off the tip of the leaf? And most people think, well, the corona will adapt to it and just be around it. But here's another. I keep these books right by. This is the picture. The corona is still there, even though the piece of leaf is missing. So it really looks like the corona is the template for the physical structure to precipitate around or coalesce around or organize around. It's not a byproduct, it's primary. So again, that shows that the energy body is key. The physical body takes its signals from the energy body. And then, that's what Chinese medicine says, that energy follows thought, and the body, or the blood, as they say, follows the energy. So they knew about the energy link between mind and body. What is that, 3,000 years ago? And we're just waking up now.
Yeah. Well, we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to What Is Going On. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and my guest today is retired Harvard Medical School affiliated psychiatrist, Dr. Eric Leskowitz. And we're talking about his latest book, The Mystery of Life Energy, Biofield Healing, Phantom Limbs, Group Energetics, and Gaia Consciousness. We'll be back with more from Eric Leskowitz after this break.
Times TV.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of Times flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor, and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who've walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees, and no BS. Just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself. Invest in your brand and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Everything that we do, we can do in a contemplative manner. Through the art of contemplation, you can use the gene keys in a really powerful way. Gene keys is basically the code book of life. In the gene keys, the book is made up of these three levels: shadows, gifts, and siddhis. And the journey is through those three levels, kind of unpicking of the shadow states, the releasing of the gifts, and then the embodying of this higher consciousness called the siddhi. And the siddhis are very exalted words. And it's not like we kind of suddenly are all these exalted Christ-like beings, but we have flashes and illuminations along the journey. And the more we get stuck into the journey, the more illumination comes to us, because the more we're releasing the light from in these codes inside our DNA. So all those revelations are inside us. So the contemplative way is the inner way.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Dr. Leskowitz, in the book, you also talk about energy and ancient sites, crop circles, paranormal phenomena. Where does all of that come into this?
Well, again, the common denominator is the notion of energy. And I first had some personal experiences apart from this whole medical model and energetic way of thinking. My wife is British, so we've had an opportunity to go visit these sites, especially the stone circles of Stonehenge and Avebury. And also we're fortunate enough to see some of the crop circles over the last 20, 30 years. But I didn't really connect it to all this life energy stuff until much more recently when, and again, I don't remember a particular moment where it occurred to me, but just I think part of it was having retired from clinical work and taking the time to write up a book. It became sort of how my thoughts evolved. And I realized that if living beings are imbued with life energy, and if the earth is a living being, then the earth should have life energy too. And this is not a new thought. I mean, indigenous peoples around the world know this and have known this for thousands of years, and revere certain locations as being special or sacred. But it was a new way of thinking to me. And it turned out there's a tradition, well, again, throughout the world, but in England, began about 100 years ago. A fellow named Alfred Watkins, he did a lot of walking, he was a rambler, and he noticed that many of these sacred sites, like stone circles, chapels, holy wells, what have you, on a map, all lined up. I mean, he could stand on a hilltop and see one there and one there. And, so he talked about it and developed the term ley lines, L-E-Y, ley lines, as connections. But he didn't have an esoteric or energy angle to it. That came maybe 50 years ago. The sort of the new consciousness came in, and people began to look at those sites from a new angle of what they felt, because it's very common for people to have intense subjective experiences there, which, you could say, to go back to your earlier thought, it could be just placebo, that people are so excited that they finally got to Stonehenge that, wow. And that's a part of it. But so the quest was, is there a way to measure what's going on, and to study in that way what's different about these locations? And the science isn't there yet, but there are, you can measure magnetic fields and radioactivity levels and things like that. And there are some patterns emerging. The method that's been most used to map these out is dowsing, which, isn't credible in the scientific community, although I was very surprised to find out there's been research on it where teams have gone out to see whether it's random that they find a location to drill a well, or whether there's a statistical significance to it. And there's some, actually the latest blog I posted has a citation of a German study where they, far beyond randomness, were able to locate accurately where to drill wells by underground water current. So people have adapted dowsing to holy sites and measured this whole meridian across southern England. Seems to have one of the most prominent ones. It goes from southwest, the tip of Cornwall, all the way up to the Norfolk Broads, and encompasses places like Stonehenge and Glastonbury and some of the really well-known sites. So to see that diagram, it was a straight line with dots on it. It looked exactly like an acupuncture meridian. So that got me, and many others, thinking along those lines. What else happens to the Earth as a result of her being alive? I learned that Stonehenge and Sedgbeer are the two best known, but there are hundreds of these smaller stone circles throughout England, and they had some sort of ceremonial function. It's not 100% clear what happens, but they do help to magnify the energy that's already present at this location. It could be simply a sort of a tuning fork kind of resonance thing because of the type of sandstone that they're usually made of. There's a question that it's called the piezoelectric effect, that converted into electromagnetism by physical movements. So somehow that harnessed what was already there. Doing human ceremony in a place like that can magnify the energetics. And so I think that's one of the really unusual and important things about it. One of the stone circles we visited, well, it was no longer a stone circle. It had actually been dismantled by the church to build a chapel, that they literally disconnected, unplugged this pagan site so that people would not be drawn into the primitive ways, but could follow the teachings of the church. And it's actually a conscious thing. There's some quotations where that's literally what they tried to do. So in a way, the church hierarchy knew something was afoot and tried to sabotage it.
Many churches, you referred to the fact that, they can actually see how the church spires line up across the land. And many of those churches have been deliberately built on sites that did have, sacred energy, were sacred to the people that lived there. But I've also heard of gold mining companies hiring dowsers, oil companies hiring. In fact, my own sister, when she bought a plot of land on an island in Canada, she used a dowser to find water, and that became their well.
Right. No, that's not a scientific study, but those corporations are not going to waste money on something that's just
absolutely
just a room. So that's actually really important data, if you will, that these companies pay down. And I live in New England, and it's still common in the rural areas out here to find a dowser to see where to drill for the water well.
What about paranormal phenomena? Often people will say haunted houses. There is an energetic imprint from, the ghost, the person who lived there, who maybe met their end by foul means or something. So the emotion around their passing has created this energetic imprint. And that's what people are experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different levels to that. I'll say something about what happens at the stone circles and the crop circles, but there is some science about how emotions and state of mind can imprint surroundings. A physicist named William Tiller at Stanford University did these studies. It's got to be like 30 years ago now, where he had a group of people regularly sit and meditate in a room that was used for nothing else. It was just for meditating
Yes.
and to see what would happen over the course of time. And they found that they could bring a beaker of water into the room and leave it there. And the pH, the acidity level of the water would change in a room that the only thing that happened about in the room was that people meditated in it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the water would stay at the
Yeah.
7.0 neutral. So his terminology was that this space had been conditioned by
Yes.
human attention and intention. And there's a lot of research now that validates it. So I think if intention can imprint it, some people are also sensitive enough that they can detect it. Some people are. It's a skill. It's a gift. Some people are sensitive at detecting energy, and other people are fairly dense.
Mhm.
I have to admit, when I did my energy training, whatever it was, 30, 40 years ago, I was in many ways the dumbest kid in the class because I couldn't feel these energies. Everybody else was saying, "Oh, look, his liver is all out of balance, and my third eye is," and I didn't. None of that registered. But with practice and intention, I gradually developed sensitivity. Some people are just born that way, and especially kids and animals are sort of known to be sensitive that way. There's a really great movie based on a Brazilian medium. In Brazil, spiritism is very, very common, and mediumship is well respected, and there are hospitals devoted to it. One of the bestseller mediums, his story was made into a movie called The Astral City, and it's about somebody who dies and his life experiences in the other world, and how he comes back to check on his family and to see how his family is doing. And one of the most moving scenes in the film is the adults don't know he's there. I mean, the film shows him being there, but the adults are oblivious. The 5-year-old kid and the pet dog are the only ones who notice him and come up to him and interact with him. So sensitivity to these energies, it varies from person to person, but I do think it's a real sensitivity that it's sort of an outgrowth of this kind of sensitivity. Uh-oh. I think you've frozen. So yeah, the way this energy relates to stone circles is that those settings are conducive to having these experiences, and then there are many, many anecdotal stories about people who go to a stone circle or a crop circle and have, a healing or a psychic vision. I had one very interesting experience. I had a chance to see a crop circle, and there was my wife and I were walking inside it, and somebody approached us from the other side, and we got to chatting. And it turns out this fellow was my mirror image. He was a British endocrinologist. So he was studying the endocrine glands. I was studying the energy of each gland. He had a beard. He was bald. He was Jewish, and a lot of weird things. That why did we two happen to meet at that time? We stayed in touch and did some collaboration. Also, those kind of synchronicities tend to happen more in these elevated places.
Yeah.
And
Spaces. Yeah.
yeah, and there's also something about the energy of that region in England that I think contributes to the fact that so many crop circles occur there. They actually have been reports of crop circles in over 50 countries around the world, but the huge majority of them are in England and in southern England, Wiltshire, around Stonehenge and Avebury. And one of the theories that I talk about in the book is that there's something about the energetics of that region because of all the ley lines and the heightened coherent energy that it makes it a easier canvas, as this writer talks about, for whoever the intelligence is to paint their crop circle pictures by whatever means that is, and that makes a lot of sense to me. That the symbols of the crop circles are, well, we don't really know what they mean, and no one has really done a good job of decoding it. So we're still at the stage of just being in awe of it. Actually, I think if you can see
see one behind you, yes.
Yeah, there's one right behind me. It's I have a crop circle calendar that Lucy Pringle from England.
There's also the aspect of, a morphic field. I mean, the more people go there, the more people think about it, the more they expect them, the more they experience them, the more conditioned the space becomes, so the more likely they are to happen.
Right. Those are the kind of stories that you hear. There's actually a crop circle museum that's been established in Alton Barnes, one of the center points. And there's many examples of groups of people who had the strong intention to see a crop circle. So they camped out one evening on a hillside overlooking, and lo and behold, something happened. And, it implies that there's some sort of communication across the different dimensions and levels. And I'm not exactly sure how that happens and what it is, but I do think it is.
My phone is on silent, but clearly it's not being silent. So I don't know whether that's some form of energy that's activating my phone or not, but I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I mean, you hear stories like that too, of a lot of times cameras break down or tape recorders stop functioning inside a crop circle, and it happens so often that it's not. I don't think it's coincidence, because it will resume functioning when they leave the crop circle and things like that.
So the common denominator in all of this, as you point out in your book, is energy. We are swimming in energy. Energy is everything. You offer some little techniques and tips for people to balance their own energy. And you talk about something called, is it QEBS?
It's SQUEBS. That's just my acronym. 6 quick energy balancing steps. And it's really just, there are many techniques out there on the internet and through all different trainings to develop techniques that work for you. So I would encourage people to just go with what they've already experienced. The ones that I used some of them were from that acupressure point. There's also the idea of tapping on your breastbone stimulates the heart chakra, but also the thymus gland underneath it. There's also ways to balance the energy in your head by smoothing out.
Are we working on the vagus nerve there?
Well, I think the vagus nerve is like an intermediary. It carries some of these energetic messages into your body. I think that's the sort of the next frontier, is how does the energetic shift make the nervous system shift? Where does the vagus nerve pick up the message that you're balancing your chakras? I don't think we know that yet, and it would be interesting to know. But some of these techniques, like a very simple one, is from craniosacral work, that you put your right hand behind your head and your left hand on your forehead, and just you close your eyes and just very gently contact. And if you sort of settle into it, you can actually feel some things shifting. The plates of the skull are shifting in a way that would happen in a craniosacral therapy, but there's nothing else. So it's a brain balancing. The frontal and occipital regions come into balance. It takes a minute. Many of these techniques are so quick and yet can bring about a big impact. Somebody like Donna Eden is a well-known energy practitioner, and she and her husband David Feinstein have written a series of books and lays it all out. She has some great demos on YouTube about 5-minute daily energy routine that people report very dramatic results from. It's, you have to get into the mindset of agreeing, okay, I will do this. I will make the commitment. I will have the intention to do it. But once you make that intention, these techniques can add big benefit to your life and to your health.
What made you decide to write this book now?
Well, part of it was retirement. we lived for 30 years in one of the suburbs of Boston. It was a great place to raise kids and all, but it was getting overdeveloped and noisy, and it wasn't as green and quiet as it used to be. So I was able to sort of phase out my work in steps, and we moved to the western part of the state, which is rural, the foothills of the Berkshire Mountains, and still do some clinical work. But at some point, I realized my heart wasn't in it. It wasn't necessary for me to do it. And so I stopped doing that. But my head was still full of ideas. So I started writing it down, and it turned into a book. That wasn't my intention to write a book, but I realized that the story of my growth and development mirrored what's going on in the culture as a whole. And I thought it would be interesting. I actually wasn't thinking about the audience. I was enjoying writing it. And so from that, the book came.
Well, it's a book that's very timely because, as we all know, most of our structures, all of our structures, especially medicine, they're crumbling, and they don't work anymore. And it's time for people to be looking at who they are and what they're made of and what they can do for themselves. And I think your book points this out very, very well to people. Do you see a coming revolution in medicine driven by, energy, frequency, technologies, etc.?
I do. I'm not even sure if it's a revolution or an evolution. That I'm not sure how quickly it will be, but it's happening now. I mean, for example, our hospital had a small grant to hire a trainer in Reiki. That's one of the hands-on energy techniques that a lot of our therapists learned how to do, but also the trainee doctors who were going through their specialty training at our hospital. At least a dozen of those physicians, MDs, now know how to do energy healing. And now, 40 years ago, that would have been totally impossible. So that's how it happens. Harvard has a group called the Osher Institute for Integrative Medicine Research, and they're looking into some of this. It's not so much the energy yet. It's more herbs and electrical, balancing magnetic fields and things like that. But
I have a friend who started the San Diego Reiki Corps probably 20, 30 years ago. And they used to go into Sharp Memorial Hospitals and work with oncology patients.
Yeah.
And it was incredibly successful. And they're still doing it today.
Yeah, that was actually really important because they would do it on a volunteer basis.
Yes.
And once they got their foot in the door, people liked it so much that they were invited in. Just a quick aside, I know one of the viewers was confused by, I said it was my right hand back and left hand in front. I think the camera flips the right left, so it is the right hand. But try whichever, you may be one of the altered polarity people where the other way works best. So whichever feels more comfortable for you, go ahead with.
One of my favorite lines in The Mystery of Life Energy is when you say that no scientists were harmed in the shifting of this theory, but it is important to cleanse our own doors of perception by dismantling some crucial conceptual issues that prevent people from accessing a deeper understanding of the energetic nature of reality. We're almost out of time. We've got 2 minutes at the most. Is there something that you might like to say to our viewers about the energetic nature of reality?
Well, I don't have a good 25 words or less kind of summary because it covers so many different tips, but I think we are all united in this sea of energy. And because we focus so much on the material, we've excluded what unites us. And, there's more information on the website that it's themysteryoflifeenergy.com. But it's basically the themes that we've been talking about, that people know at some level, everybody has experienced it at some level, but never had a chance to put it together. And I think because medicine is such an esteemed profession, it's really important and crucial and valuable that some of the leadership is coming from medicine. And it's changed a lot. There are a lot of physician acupuncturists now. And, my hospital was the home base for many years of a Harvard Medical School training program for physician acupuncture, which, 30 years ago would have been a contradiction in terms, and yet now it's happening. So we're in the middle of it. It's just not quite there yet, and there are so many problems coming to the surface. We don't have it quite and I know you've just said the NHS has really suffered from 15 years of austerity, and so it's really hard to say what the system could deliver if it was up and running. We've just had a healthcare system in Massachusetts where 5 hospitals have gone bankrupt because they were investment devices by private equity, and they didn't care anything about healthcare. It was just about how to squeeze a profit out of it. So the whole idea of medicine as a for-profit business, that has to change. The idea of, just the money angle of it in pharmaceuticals.
Well, I think the important takeaway is that we are energy beings. Energy is everywhere. We can have access ourselves. We don't have to rely on these, outdated systems, etc. Another one of my favorite lines from your book is, Western medicine is afraid of the light, but the prisoners are getting restless. So it is time for all of us, I think, to get restless and to start looking at what we can do for ourselves. I think we're out of time now, so I'm going to have to leave it there. I'm sorry, it's a great conversation, but I do encourage people to read the book and go to your website. So Dr. Eric Leskowitz, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me as your guest.
The Mystery of Life Energy, Biofield Healing, Phantom Limbs, Group Energetics and Gaia Consciousness is published by Bear & Company, a division of Inner Traditions. For more information about Dr. Eric Leskowitz and his books, blog posts, international travels and research, visit his website at themysteryoflifeenergy.com. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. Thanks for being with me today. I'll be back with another edition of What is Going On at the same time next week. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to Dr. Eric Leskowitz.